So we're rolling. First of all, thank you all for coming out. Give yourselves a round of applause for coming out. It's hard to get people to do anything these days. So thank you for coming. And I want to thank, first of all, Pete. Where's Pete? Thank you for. Where's Pete?
Thanks for coming. Thanks for bringing all
Pete,
the books.
we've been talking about doing a book signing for many years, but he wanted one about my family's nightclub, the Flame Cafe. Does anybody remember the Flame Cafe?
Yay.
Lori does, of course Lori does. Okay, so you'll have to settle. We may do that one in the future, depending on what my publishers say, but we'll have to settle for good old Bob today. So thank you. Let me begin by saying this is the official launch with me and this guy here with the Bob Dylan in Minnesota book.
Hey.
About a year and a half in the making.
Yeah, last February.
Okay. About a year and a half in the making, and we didn't know a thing about it before that, did we? Well, actually, I did. If anyone who buys a book, you'll see on the back there's 2 books here. There was, so this is the third in a trilogy series. They're totally independent of each other, but the first one came out, Bob Dylan in London, and it was by the author K.G. Miles. I found out about it right away. You probably did too.
I knew about his book all along, yeah.
Yes, the London one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then he released, about 6 months later, he released Bob Dylan in the Big Apple. It's kind of a travelogue guide. Get the spots. They all look like this size, paperback. And then when I saw that, I knew he's got to come to Minnesota, right?
Why didn't he do it first? That was my first question.
He did it backwards.
Why wouldn't you do the Minnesota book
You don't
first?
go London, New York, Minnesota. You go Minnesota. Exactly.
Right.
So then that happened, and then Keith, K.G. Miles, he contacted select people in Minnesota, in the whole state, chose us too for the Twin Cities. So we're very fortunate of the entire Twin Cities. Matt lives in, Matt will tell you about where he is and whatnot. But we're the only 2 in the Twin Cities. It's by K.G. Miles with Paul Metza, who some of you may know. He now lives in Duluth. Ed Newman is a writer and blogger. He lives in Duluth. Me, MARC PERCANSKY, and Matt Steichen. So it's a wonderful read. I don't know what to tell you about it. We worked hard on it. I was asked to start writing about it last January, February, and my mom was very sick at the time. So I said, I kind of agreed because I liked Keith, and I said, all right, I'll help you. I'll be a consultant. I didn't think he wanted me to write anything. I've never written a thing before in my life, or a Bob book, okay? I knew about as much writing as anybody. So he says, okay, and it took about a month. I said, I'll help you because I was a consultant with the mural downtown, which is, there's some stories about that in here. And I said, I'll be a consultant. You must know you were writing for it. Then
I can tell you exactly how that came to be.
Okay, so then he says to me, no, would you mind writing a troubadour tale? So what the hell's a tale? Troubadour tale? True or false? I can make up stuff all day, no problem. All right, I'll write. Write a tale, that's it. I couldn't write anything. I had the worst time in the world writing. I wrote here's what he said to me. What does Bob Dylan mean to Minnesota, and what does Minnesota mean to Bob Dylan? Now, what would you do if someone said that to you? You'd ask Bob. Say, go ask Bob. So I was pretty vague, and I started writing something, and I said, all right, it was the worst garbage I've ever seen in my life. I deleted it and threw it out. It made no sense. It wasn't good. So I mulled it over and thought about it, and then my mom passed away. So that changed what I was writing about, which I was kind of glad that I was writing, and I figured, all right, I'm going to write a personal story about her and Bob, give a tribute to her. Write one like that. I started writing that. Then I had one about me doing magic with Bob, so that was my second one. Then I was asked to do Blood on the Track stuff because we helped with that here, so I had to write a chapter on that. And then things started moving, and I was writing 4 chapters at once. I ended up writing 4 chapters in the afterword. So it's all in here. It's kind of chronological.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. So that's my story. It's a fun thing. We all worked kind of on the whole book. We all were editors. We all collaborated. We had a good time doing all that. And I will now introduce to you this guy, but I want to say a few things about him, okay? I met him at a Bob Dylan concert. Where else? Jennifer? I knew you first.
Yes.
This is his wife, Jennifer. Give her a hand. She's in the book. And her 4 kids. They're all here today. So I met you first, briefly.
You met me, I used to go to shows with my younger sister, and so we bump into you and your mom
A
up
year or
front at a
2
lot of
before
shows.
you met this guy.
Before I met Matt. Yep.
Yeah. Then I met
So
Matt.
We go back further then.
So I'd have to figure out the day I met Matt, what show it was at. We'll figure that out
I
later.
don't remember exactly.
But so he met his wife Jennifer. I'll let him tell you all that. But I just want to say one thing about him. He wrote some amazing things in here, and I'll let him tell you about it. But one thing I want to say about him is he says, if Bob Dylan didn't exist, I wouldn't have a family. So I'll introduce to you Matt Steichen, co-author with me. Okay?
So my story for how I came to be part of this book, I post about Bob Dylan online a lot. And so the author, KG Miles, I think the first thing that happened was that he saw that I visited Duluth and Hibbing a lot compared to most people, and I had a lot of photos that he wanted to use. So he came to me and said, oh, you have photos of Bob's house and Hibbing High School and the iron ore mines and Echo's house and the armory. Can I use them for my book? And I said, sure. And then he said, would you like to write anything? And I said, well, at first, no. And then after a while, I decided when he was starting to map out the chapters of what was going to be in the book, what it was really missing was what does Bob Dylan think about all these places, and what does Bob Dylan think about Minnesota? And I know I moved to Minnesota in 2006 because of my wife. My girl of the North Country brought me here. Bob brought me here to see a show, and then she kept me here the last 18 years. So, so I thought the important thing that I'd heard a lot was that there are at least some people in Minnesota that think that Bob Dylan doesn't like Minnesota, and that he left in 1961 and he's never been back and he doesn't care about Minnesota and so forth. You all know some of those rumors, of course. Of course, I knew from reading all sorts of interviews and from listening to his music that he's said so many positive things about Minnesota, and he said so many positive things about how it shaped, his imagination and all the positive experiences he's had here. So I thought if that's missing from the book, it really doesn't have the heart that it kind of needs. Like, saying that this building is still here and you can go see it is interesting, but what about what Bob thinks about that time in his life and about those moments and about what they've meant to him? So my 15 or 17 or so pages is really about that, connecting the dots of not just the places and not just the people, but what Bob has said about them. And some of these things are quotes from obscure interviews he gave in 1977 that no one has read since, or maybe just some of us have read since. So I thought, there are moments where, basically any moment where any interviewer has said, how do you feel about Minnesota over the years? Those have been the moments when Bob quits trying to be mysterious and he kind of drops the mystique a little bit, and he's been very forthcoming over the years, saying what Minnesota has meant to him and his memories of the lakes and the trees and the trains and how it shaped him as a person. So I thought, let's pull everything I can together about Bob Dylan. I literally went to an archive of hundreds of Bob Dylan interviews and searched childhood, searched Minnesota, searched youth, and gathered every single thing he ever said about Minnesota and tried to put it in the book. So that's what I brought to it.
What's the most recent thing in terms of what he's
Only a few years ago. He's actually said a few really interesting things lately. Rolling Stone actually asked him what he thinks about music tourism, because he's gone and seen the childhood homes of Bruce Springsteen and John Lennon and Neil Young. So the interviewer was actually surprised when Bob said he absolutely welcomes that. He thinks it's really cool that people go in search of his childhood, and he said that maybe some of what was in the magic when he was a kid is still there, so people should go explore Hibbing and Duluth. So there's his recommendation of the book right there, I think.
Should we do a Q&A now, or you want to start signing? It's up to the crowd here. Anyone questions? We can do that, and we're going to sign books. I also want to thank Amanda back there for organizing this event. Give her a hand. And I want to thank Lindsay back there, who pitched in when Amanda wasn't here. And all of Barnes & Noble in Minneapolis, the best bookshop, one of my favorites here. Been seeing Pete a long time. I also want to thank KG Miles and our publishers, McNidder Grace, who are in the UK publisher house there. Thank you all. So we're going to sign books. We'll take our time. Anyone wants one, we'll sign it directly to you and enjoy. I hope you like the book. Send us the emails if you read it and got any questions and anything you want to tell us. We love feedback. I'm at magicmarkproductions.com. How do they get a hold of you?
Twitter.
Twitter. There you go. Yep, Matt Steichen at Twitter. Okay, we were on the morning news this morning. It was a fun segment.
Yeah.
So you'll see that online. And we have some more things planned. Check the websites, check our Twitter, and you'll see what's going on. Because the book just came out here in America. It came out in April in the UK. It's all over the world, but it's here today at Barnes & Noble. So have fun. Thank you all for coming. Question?
I'll answer just a couple more more
Sure,
questions?
yes, yes,
before
sure,
we
yes,
get the answers? I
yes.
mean, I'm not the aficionado.
Oh, yeah,
of all
you,
these
where did you
people.
say you were from?
Minnesota.
No, but, no, Hibbing.
No, Medicine Lake, Minnesota.
Okay, Medicine Lake, yes,
All right.
yep.
And I think about you because you might know that we always talk about Prince has a Minnesota sound, right? As there's something in this book or something that you folks know that will give us some insight into Bob Dylan's music and what about it is infused with Minnesota music or Minnesota sound or that which is Minnesota. And if you don't have an answer to the question, that's fine.
We can make one up. No. So what you're saying is very interesting and very so Bob Dylan sound, like the
Right.
Prince sound. They
Prince-
don't really say that, do they, Matt?
No.
Oh, but they imitate
I
how
know
he
how
sings.
I know how I'd answer it though. I would. So I can't speak as much to the audio, to the to the music itself. But I think when I think of the things that kind of encapsulate what Bob's music is about, I think about like his work ethic is a very Minnesota Midwestern work ethic, and that's something I associate with him and his drive to keep doing what he's doing. I think is very much inspired by growing up here. And I think his sense of humor is very much a Midwestern sensibility. He's sarcastic and witty and sometimes just really goofy. I would say there were 4 things that I thought of this morning actually, and I wrote them right here. The empathy that he has in his music. I think he grew up, he was, with working for his dad and
Furniture.
yeah, and like having to go to the poor mining families and take back furniture that they couldn't pay for when the mines closed. And there was very much a class system there, as far as the rich and the poor and the haves and the have-nots. And I think that, like understanding the separation of those things and like how it affects people and feeling sorry for people and having empathy is something that he kind of absorbed as a child that's always stayed with him because he's always been on the side of people that are being treated unfairly. So that's one thing I think of. And I also think one other thing that I would say is the natural world and the way that he incorporates nature into his music. I grew up in Iowa and Iowa doesn't have as much to offer nature-wise, but when Minnesota, people really, we embrace this beautiful summer and we find a way to embrace and enjoy the long winter, and Bob's very much a seasonal person, and you can go to any decade of his career and that's a constant, that he's always referencing nature and the beauty of the natural world, and I think that's a Minnesotan Midwestern thing. So but as far as orally, the Bob Dylan sound.
You just sparked an idea that I had, and I wanted to see it on the news today, but I didn't. But what you said about his personality.
Yeah.
So I was thinking that one thing, because people always ask me, well, people who've met him obviously know what he's like, and they have their experiences with him. Is he a nice guy or not a nice guy? Did he treat me good or whatever? But so they have their, what is he like? As a person. I think, and I'm not bragging, but if you read the book, his personality is in this book, because we have, we have 4 different perspectives on him, 4 so-called fanatics, 5.
Fair enough, yeah.
Seth Roll called it aficionados, which I like better. What do you think?
Better
An
than
aficionado
crazy
or a
person.
better than a crazy obsessed person. So, but 1 minute it's funny. We're talking about eggs in here and onion rings, and then there's serious essays, and that's how he's like. He's got his moods. He's a Gemini. If you're into that, and he's a wonderful guy, and he's got his, just like any other human being, emotions, but he's got such a heavy weight with the lyrics that he wrote and what he did with himself, and that follows him along. So he's done pretty well. Tomorrow night he's finishing a tour in Rome, Italy, and he's 82 years old. So God bless him. But
he also said he can't do that anymore. What he wrote when he
yes,
was younger.
that was on
And
6.
that's gone.
Yes,
That,
he was
you
saying he
know,
couldn't
so-
write those songs like that
Yeah.
anymore. But meanwhile, and then 2 years ago he releases what I think is one of his top 5 best albums ever.
Exactly.
Rough and
There's
Rowdy
no
Ways. Which Pete, do you have the vinyl back here?
Matt, this might be in the book, but going back to the original question, didn't you talk about the trilogy of Minnesota albums, like
Great.
Planet Waves,
Right.
New Morning?
Yeah,
That's great, too.
That was what I was going to talk about in Tulsa, but I couldn't make it this year.
Well, now's your shot.
Was that
I want to hear it.
that Bob obviously went out and set the world on fire in the 60s, and when that became too big and he tried to kind of retreat into a more normal family life in the early 70s, he wrote the trio of albums New Morning, Planet Waves, and Blood on the Tracks, which is very much kind of the focus of my piece. And I think that's because there's such a heavy Minnesota influence. I think he was turning away from the psychedelic stuff and away from the mainstream country stuff. And as he kind of moved more toward the singer-songwriter genre, he started to write music that was more about how he felt and about his more personal life. And when he did that, that's when the Minnesota connections really started to come into his work really heavily.
All three of those albums have several songs referencing Minnesota. And
exactly.
you put that, no one thought of that till you did.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out I was the one that.
We
I was the one that.
Behind every good man is a good
We've
wife.
talked about that plenty
Right?
of times, yes.
We needed a fifth or sixth co-author,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
She said a lot of the same things that I said in the article or the
You're gonna love the
chapter
story about
about
them.
our
I mean,
family,
it really
so.
brings this family to light. The book. They have four boys, and they're all here. I believe they're all here. How many concerts have they all been to?
4 or 5 for the oldest 3.
Yeah.
They all love Bob Dylan. It's pretty amazing. Either they were just listening to him in their cribs, or these two forced it on them.
Well, so
I'll have to ask them today. We'll have to ask them.
This one
You.
would not let me sing lullabies when he was a baby. The only song that he would let me sing was Mr. Tambourine Man, and he would like cover my mouth when I
And
tried
he's
to
named
sing
after an
anything
obscure
else.
Bob Dylan cover.
What's his name?
Ira.
It's Ira.
Take a bow, Ira. Let's get all 4 up here. Why not, right? Jennifer, son number 4.
This is the baby.
Baby, come on up here. Who's the one who has a...
Charles Dillon.
What is it?
Desmond Charles Dillon.
Desmond.
Charles Dillon.
You had to get the name.
It was the last.
Everyone asked us over the years, which one did you name after Dylan? Which one did he name after Dylan?
I'm not making this
and we
stuff
didn't
up,
do
you
it
know.
until we got to the
We didn't
fourth
just find
one.
these 4 guys
And then
walking
we
around,
decided.
out here,
We finally, yeah,
This
the
is
4th
real.
one we gave him the name Dylan.
There's a great picture of all this family on the Hibbing house.
In the book, there's a picture of all of them at Bob's childhood home.
Yeah,
Yep.
we're all friends with the owner who owns the Hibbing home and the Duluth home. I don't know if any of you know Bill Pago. So here they are. Who else do we have now?
We've got Levi,
Oldest.
oldest,
Who I
Calvin.
met at several
You've met
shows.
Levi at some shows.
Couple shows.
Yep, Calvin.
Calvin.
Middle.
Who has the favorite song, Mr. Tambourine Man?
Well, that's Ira. Oh no, that's Desmond.
One kid likes Joker
Desmond
Man.
likes Joker Man and Mr. Tambourine Man.
Does anyone like It's Alright Mom, Only Bleeding, or Desolation Row? I mean, what is it for these kids here? Yeah, no one likes Idiot
They
Win,
could all
right?
just sing a bunch of songs for you. They're being bashful.
I've seen videos of them playing. So great. Thank you all 4 of you. There's a great shot of them. He wrote a great essay, and it's unbelievable. You'll never read anything like it. This family. I don't know anyone else like them. They were featured in the Pioneer Press, bit of story on them, and Matt spoke just at the Duluth Dylan Fest.
I did, yeah.
He did the lecture there. Every year they have a lecture named for John Bushy, our dear friend, who lives in Duluth, had a radio show. He passed away, and they named a lecture after him. And Matt did it this year to launch our book in Duluth in May. So, and you better take that all across the country and start speaking this, because it's a wonderful essay. All right, any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Lori. Lori,
kind of a-
yes, Lori. This is Lori.
Kind of a difficult question.
But I want to. You're with the Dinkytown Preservation.
Right, I am. I'm on the board of Preserve Historic Dinkytown.
Yes.
Yeah, but the question is about Dinkytown. It's a difficult question.
Yes. And you were talking
I was
about-
friends with a lot of Bob's friends back when he was living in Dinkytown, hanging at the U. And they told me that, especially my friend Paul Davies, who died years ago,
Yes.
that he wrote the song.
Come on up here. Come on up here.
He wrote the song
Get in between
Positively
us.
4th Street because he was
This is Lori
angry
Sabra.
at all the people that didn't like him when he lived here, and then when he got famous, he came back and
You met Lori?
he wrote the song Positively 4th Street. You know,
You owned a bookstore.
yeah, I owned a bookstore.
What was it called?
Savron's Bookstore. Oh, right, I'm not wearing my Duluth t-shirts.
So you remember him hanging out there.
Yeah, yeah,
And
so,
that Dinkytown Preservation, we use some of that as research.
but I mean, what the question is, did he write the song Positively 4th Street, kind of dissing the people who he used to be friends with it from Dinkytown?
You think he did? Because
I do, kind of,
Because
yeah.
what's the debate on that?
Well,
There's
it's
two possible Fourth
either
Streets.
yeah, because there's a 4th Street in Greenwich Village too. And when he left the folk movement and went to rock, then it could also be perceived that he was talking about the people that the hangers-on that felt like he kind of left the
Okay,
folk movement in Greenwich
fair
Village.
enough,
So
yeah.
50-50 on
But I
that.
don't
But
know
only
about
Bob
the
could tell
timing
you
of it,
exactly.
though. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was 65.
It's a very kind of.
But he could make up a song on the spot. It often used old songs, old tunes.
Well, he never says what any of them are about anyway. They're
Yeah.
about what you want them to think they're about.
Right.
So you can let you draw your own conclusions to them. But that's
Thanks.
a good point. Thank you, Lori. That's wonderful.
So how did you get your resemblance to Bob? I see you around town. I mean, did you work at this or just by
Listening to him all these years, you just start turning it. Jim.
What's the most
Jim Walsh, ladies and gentlemen.
See you, man.
Author.
Cheers, brother.
Books in here.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for showing up.
My question,
Prince
sir.
aficionado.
CC. What's the most surprising thing you guys, I mean, you both keep-
being here right now. Besides that, go ahead.
The most surprising thing you discovered, you both knew a lot coming into it. What maybe landmarks or places that you weren't familiar with that
Doing
were
the book, you
important?
mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I learned a lot. What did I learn? But I did learn a lot. I didn't know about the whole railroad train accident.
Yeah, I knew about. Yeah.
What's that?
Tell Jim.
Yeah, this is in one of the more obscure
That was a big
biographies,
one.
and we retold the story in this book. There's an intersection in the Brooklyn section of Northeast Hibbing where Bob and his high school buddies, there was a train going this way and a train going that way, and they were revving their engines ready to go as soon as the train passed. And once that train passed, Bob revved it and took off. And then there was another train coming in the opposite direction, and he pulled up, and Leroy Hoykala said it was within a foot of being under the train,
Cool.
and it did not stop.
That's great.
And so if Bob would have, there would have been
I never knew
none of
that.
us would be here talking about
We
Bob
wouldn't be
Dylan. But yeah, that would have been that.
Wow.
So he also hit a kid on Main Street in Hibbing on his bike, so he's a very bad motorcyclist.
The other thing I did learn, it's a good question, Jim, exactly where the 10 o'clock scholar was. You know, when they asked me to write, when they asked me to write about Dinkytown, I wasn't there. I wasn't born when he was in Dinkytown. So I went to school there, and I was at Sammy House and whatnot, but it was right kind of next to Vecchio's, where Vecchio's is gone now. A few doors down, research, and I could show you exact spot now. And then the other thing I did, Purple Onion, was in St. Paul, not in Dinkytown.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, by the time it moved to
Those are too
Dinkytown.
confused for me.
But I learned a lot of things. That's a good question. I learned several things by doing it. From the other guys, obviously. I didn't learn anything from what I wrote myself. I even learned what I wrote myself. Wow, how the hell am I writing this? You know. But good question. Thank you for coming too.
Yeah,
by the way, you doing good?
Yeah.
Used to see him at the dog park with our now passed on dogs. He has another one.
That's right.
But
Ruby.
Zero and Ruby.
R.I.P. Ruby.
Yeah.
And Zip.
You got a new dog now, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yes. Question.
Yeah, so question, Martin. You were obviously with your mom very close to Bob.
Yep.
What was your relationship after your mom passed or in later years with Bob? And is there any relationship?
Yeah, well, first I don't see him as much as I'd like to. He doesn't see anybody anymore as much as he's back on the road, tours a lot, he does his own thing, you know, he does, they never did not become friends. They always said good things about each other, and she didn't want to see him in the later years because she wasn't feeling well. So I spoke about this at her funeral. I said, you know, and one time she was laying there, you know, she was a glamorous lady. There's a picture of me and Bob in the book and her back in the day, but it's in black and white. It's even better in color. She's wearing this bright gold jewelry. I described her in the book, but thought she was very dramatic. And that song "Sweetheart Like You," I know is definitely about her because later years she wasn't feeling so well. She was more reclusive. She didn't want to go out in public as much. And she says to me, if Bob ever calls and he comes over, don't let him in. I don't look good. I said, Ma, you know, I mean, you don't look good. All right, I will let him in. I'll talk to him, you know. Most of our times together was in Minnesota. Drive by, you know, from his west ranch there, and there's a liquor store he'd stop at from my house. But I said, Ma, you know, Bob, he's older too, you know. He's in his 80s now too, you know. So everybody gets older. I said, all right, I know, but don't let him in. I'll talk to him, and she did talk to him on his 80th birthday.
Have you had any
And he said,
conversations
he said this. He said, I can't believe I'm this old.
Yeah.
You know?
None of us can.
He said, I can't believe I feel this good being this old.
That's good news for all of us.
So there you go. Is that? And she did see him last. It shows him to 2014, coming off this bus at the Orpheum. There was 3 nights there.
We were there.
You were all there. Yes, I remember. And she spoke him a little bit outside of his bus there. 2014. Those were her last 3 concerts she ever went to.
Have you had any conversations with him since?
Not too much. I don't get to see him on tour as much as I like because I don't get out. I see him on the road and on tour and all that, but not so much. Not lately, no. Yep.
Does he have your book?
He is getting my book. I know he knows about the book. When he gets home from Europe, I know he's aware of the book because there was a an online, there's a brochure, a pamphlet. You know, they have these like 100 fanzines. And one of them's called ISIS. It's out of the UK. It's a publisher, and Bob is a subscriber to the magazine.
Really?
Yeah. So Derek, I think Derek, his name is, at ISIS told me, yeah, he gets it. They've been getting it for 25 years. I gave Bob copies of another British one called The Telegraph. The owner started out of London, and I gave him copies. Bob loves to read about himself. I don't so much anymore, but he's endless. You know, how much time can he spend on it?
That's what I learned then.
But he does like to read about himself. I mean, just to see the different perspectives. And I got stories galore about that. You know, one time there was this local, Paul Metzer would tell this story. There was a local paper, this man should be euthanized. The cover of the paper, he was doing a concert here. You probably got the stories.
Early 90s.
Paul wrote a letter back at the guy. And Bob went off on me for months about that. He says, how would you call that critic and you tell him, how would he like it if I said he should die? He just played with me like that. And I said, yeah, it's not right. You know, Bob, I don't feel bad about it. Yeah, you know. But he says, well, then why is everybody worrying when I'm going to die, he says. Why don't they worry when they're going to die? God, right? Which is true. You know, God bless him.
Mark, how did you hear that?
How did I hear
that from Bob, that reaction to that reader story?
I heard about that. You probably wrote about it. It wasn't you. It was Burl.
Burl wrote about it in City Pages.
Yes.
And what's his name?
Paul Metzer wrote about it too. He wrote a letter.
For the reader, the cover story was by, he edits
what's his name?
Minneapolis, St. Paul now.
Did he write that book with Marty Keller?
Read something? No, I'm sorry, I'm just.
But that was the cover story, right?
The cover story. This man should be
And I had it. I gave it to him. And he
You gave it to Bob?
I gave that story to Bob in the paper. He read. He took a lot of.
That's been a heartwarming moment.
Yeah, I know. I should have done it. I don't know. Maybe I saw it laying around or something. I said, I don't know. I should show you this. You know. It's like, but that was the story. I don't think it would sell concert tickets. But yeah, dog back there.
Speaking of dying, what's up? You think he's knocking on heaven's door?
Ta-da! Okay, anyone else? Should we sign a little book so we won't keep you all day? It's a nice day, right? Want to hit the lakes? That's it. Okay, I'll turn on some Bob music, and one by one, come on up, and I'll sign a book for you. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Did you get the whole footage? All one piece? That phone can do one piece?